what are the 4 things that make you unfireable?
People say that all the issues are communication issues. That's not necessarily true, but it is true that a person that does fantastic work but somehow is such a bad self-advocate or communicator, they can block what is known about the outcomes. But what I would say is this: open communication is a little bit different than good communication. You could openly communicate poorly, or you could close off communication even though you're a good communicator. Some people say that I have a required meeting that has to happen every single week with a particular person. But mostly what I do is routine short check-ins. I think that mastering the 1-minute conversation is one of the most important things that we could possibly do. That usually alleviates the need for something bigger later on. So keeping a short level of communication frequently, or a longer thing once a week, whatever it happens to be. There's no exact formula on that.
Dave, I had a question for you. What are the 4 things that make you, or I, or anyone listening, unfireable?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things, I've mentioned this before, but the number one thing that most people are worried about at their job is how they're being perceived. Do people know that I'm doing a good job? Am I doing a good job? Sometimes they don't even know. That's why I always make fun of annual reviews. I'm like, listen, if you have an annual review and you sit down with the person your annual review is with, and you or them are shocked by what's about to be said, you're so far behind in effective leadership. To be unfireable is to basically know that you are doing such a fantastic job. There's no way they'd want to get rid of you. Now, there's no doubt about it. There are circumstances that sometimes are bigger than that, like company cutbacks. Now, you're protecting yourself, even in company cutbacks, to be unfireable, so to speak, because they're going to say, well, who can we dispense with and not have it be that big of a deal? Who's expendable and then who is not? But even then it can happen. So I don't want anybody who's been fired to have some sort of complex believing that they have somehow had it always merited. Although, sadly, most often it is. Okay, I'm going to go, Nico, in ascending order, okay, on these 4. There are other things that, of course, you could put on this list, but these go, to the most important. When I get to number 1, it is absolutely by far the biggest thing a person can do to become unfireable. But number 4 is open communication. A lot of times people say that all the issues are communication issues. That's not necessarily true, but it is true that a person that does fantastic work but somehow is such a bad self-advocate or communicator, they can block what is known about the outcomes. But what I would say is this, though, that open communication is a little bit different than good communication. You could openly communicate poorly, okay, or you could close off communication even though you're a good communicator. Open communication basically means the necessary transfer of information that needs to take place between you and others in different departments is flowing. That you're not cutting off email by not responding to it at certain times. You're not unavailable or not answering your phone. There are times where you have questions and you need something that you're reaching out. You're not postponing those things, but there's an open flow of communication. Now, some people do this differently. Some people say that I have a required meeting that has to happen every single week with a particular person. And I'm a fan of that. Actually, there are some times that I do that with particular people, but mostly what I do is routine short check-ins. I think that mastering the 1-minute conversation is one of the most important things that we could possibly do, which means, hey, I'm just checking in, just seeing if you need anything from me. Here's what's going on in my day. Super quick communication. That usually alleviates the need for something bigger later on. Hey, there's something I was wondering if you could look at. Go to the back office. I noticed these statistics. Maybe you could tell me more about them later. Do you want to catch up? Something like that, whatever it happens to be. So keeping a short level of communication frequently, or a longer thing once a week, whatever it happens to be. There's no exact formula on that. In fact, I did it very differently than the CEO who I promoted to take over my spot when I moved into executive chairman. He has routine meetings every single week with everybody important in the organization, and I just kept frequent contact with them all the time and had only those meetings with people like the CFO and whatnot. In fact, I had those meetings scheduled with the CFO, and when you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue and business and all sorts of people, having an important meeting with your CFO matters. But what I found is that we communicated so often in the random open sense, with my door open, his door open, that by the time we got to our monthly meetings to review the P&Ls and all the other financial statements, I was like, okay, yep, looks good, nothing shocking here. And we oftentimes didn't even have really a full deep dive, and it wasn't that we didn't cover those things. They were just covered throughout the month routinely. The guy that I promoted is a fantastic CEO. He does it differently. Now, here's an interesting thing. Probably half of the people on his team are so happy he does it that way. That is the way they operate. And the other half are like, yeah, I don't need this. Kind of like the spontaneous thing. I don't know. I never asked them, by the way. Okay, but I'm assuming, because I do know that about half the people that I worked with were like, hey, can we have a specific routine meeting? In which case I was more inclined to actually provide that to them. Others are like, well, I'm so glad we do it this way. So, but again, I wouldn't get hung up. I don't think that you have to customize that to each particular person. You, as the leader, can determine whether or not you're more effective with just the regular routine meeting or just often check-ins. But just make sure you're not missing anyone. That's the biggest thing. That's open communication. I do want to say that because some people would look at this as though it's right and wrong. What is right is that the leader, the person in charge of this communicating, if it is a top-down thing versus bottom-up, it does it the way they're most effective. Okay? Now, what's really funny, though, is that the leader is working with somebody else who says, just so you know, I am not effective with the just check-ins like this. I need a weekly meeting like this. And you're going to claim that you're more effective as a leader by forcing them to do something that they find ineffective. Now you've got an ego problem. There is a time to customize it to the other person. But generally speaking, you take what makes you the most effective as a leader and you apply that to the circumstance, and then you make those individual catered changes according to the person that you're leading. And that's absolutely a smart way to do it. It's a prudential way to do it.
Moving to the next point here on the 4 things that make you unfireable. What is that next point?
Make things better. There's this kind of classic saying that to be a good steward, you want to leave things in better shape than you found them. Whether they're your own or they're not your own, if you make a mess, clean it up. If you borrow someone's car, return it in great shape. You're even better to fill the gas tank up if you borrow somebody's car and to vacuum it out as a token of gratitude, even if it wasn't presented to you that way. In your own role, it's the same thing. To make your role better. And some people become a little bit too overreaching with this sort of thing, and they try to step into other areas, departments that are not their own, because they are acting as though they have the solution to all things to make everything better. You don't want to go too far outside of your lane on this sort of thing, because you can have something be counterintuitive or counter-effective. But in your own role, it's important to say, here are the responsibilities that I have. Here's how I can organize it better. Here's a checklist that I can use on a daily basis. Here's a technology that I think we could use. Let me see if I can advocate for getting that technology in order to make this better. Now, sometimes that's going to mean you're going to interact or integrate with other departments as well, too. Now, there's that professional level of prowess that you would need in order to effectively win people over, to coordinate things in departments, to keep silos from taking place and turf wars. But those things are a little bit of a slower bake sometimes, and that's okay. But definitely just saying, hey, from the time that I got this job to now, did I actually make it better? And for the person who takes it over for me, did I leave them with a little bit of a simpler user manual that makes things better? This is a great way to get a promotion, by the way, is to always leave things in a better circumstance than you found them.
Now, that's a solid insight, Dave. What is a number 3, I guess, in this list of 4 things that make you unfireable?
So there's something called a 360 survey out there. It's been around for a while. This is not new. But that's basically where you have your boss do a confidential, anonymous survey about what it's like to work with you. Your peers do the same thing. And if there are subordinates, your subordinates do it. So you basically have all of these people talking behind your back, telling you exactly what you think. They think of you in a confidential way in order to super elevate your intense paranoia for the rest of your career. I say that because they have backfired for that reason with many people. But really, there is something about knowing what you're providing to each one of those 360 degrees that you're going around. Okay, are you adding value to your boss? Is their job better because you're on the team? Or are you creating problems? Your peers, would they go home and they say, one of the things I loved about the culture is Nico. Nico is like the man, and anytime I need something, he handles it and takes care of it. Your subordinates, do they say, I love working with this particular person? They empower me. They give me the resources, the tools, and the authority that I need to get something done, and therefore I feel great here. So if you add value to your boss, your peers, and your subordinates, while you have open communication and you make things better, you are virtually unfireable, but there's one missing component.
So let's get to the number one thing that makes you unfireable, Dave. What is it?
Accepting the full responsibility for your role, including your mistakes. There is no doubt about it. This is what it is. If you say that's not in my job description, well, you know what? Job descriptions, generally speaking, don't include every single thing in there because it's impossible. Okay? If you are a finger pointer, that's not our fault. It's their fault. If you lie or deceive, if you have the agenda of basically ambition, meaning that you're trying to advance yourself, which there's nothing wrong with wanting to advance, but it's an ambitious thing, which means that it's out of order. You want something without meriting it. These are all things that run counter to accepting responsibility for what's taking place. How do you expect me to? I can't ever if. In reality, there are times where there are very bad bosses out there that want you to, make the bricks without being able to provide the hay. Okay, we know that that's unjust circumstance, which sometimes is intended to make things harder because it's a passive-aggressive boss. What a sad thing. I'm not talking about that circumstance. That's the time you just leave. Okay? But if you're a person who is honest and humble and you're actually accurately assessing the circumstance, you would know, you know what? I actually do have everything that I need here to succeed. I do have everything here that I need to accept responsibility. So therefore, I need to do that. So there are some virtues that go throughout all of this in order to have open communications, make things better, add value to your boss, accept full responsibility. You need to be prudent, just. You have to have fortitude. You need to have temperance, the cardinal virtues, which I rep out constantly. But you also have to have humility, which of course is a part of fortitude, really. And you have to have magnanimity, meaning that you just refuse to be petty. Okay? And there's more to it than that. But whenever I try to explain magnanimity to people, that is the way they understand it the best, by knowing what it's not. Okay? But when you have these things, now you can accept full responsibility. And that humility is the thing that allows you to say, there was a mistake made here under my watch in what we're doing, and we're going to own that. And I think if people knew the power of owning a mistake and then correcting it, how that actually fortifies the bond and fortifies your status in an organization, because now people don't wonder what would happen if that person made a mistake. Would they hide it? Would they own it? Would they correct it? And if you are owning it and correcting it, you become even more unfireable because there's a certain level of predictability about your behaviors that actually matter. Now, we know that if you're making massive, huge mistakes on a regular basis, it doesn't matter how often you own them, you have a certain level of incompetency that would not allow you to remain unfireable. But these are the things: open communication, making things better, adding value to your boss, your peers, your subordinates, and accepting the full responsibility for your role, including mistakes. If you do that, you can be a giant. We can go slay dragons, and you will be unfireable.
Hey there, Giant. Thanks for watching Durand On Demand. I need your help with something. The world desperately needs more giants. You know it, and I know it. We've been around a lot of people struggling, figuring out how to make things go. So hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, share this with as many people as you can. We're going to build this audience, and we're going to help people slay dragons together.